Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're recording our interview of Bob May at the lovely Children's Garden behind the library at the rear entrance. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. It's supposed to be a very nice afternoon, so hopefully we will continue this conversation in the near future as well. Here's Bob May. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm spending some time at the Children's Garden at the Danvers Library. And we have Bob May with us today. And if I may call you Bob, that would be great. What I'm asking for, and I've done this with other interviewees, a brief autobiography of yourself. Who the heck are you? How have you been driven to become a candidate? Bob?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I am Bob May. I'm the Republican candidate for the state representative representing the 13th Essex District, which includes Danvers, West Peabody, and Middleton. I am married for 30 years, almost 30 years, be 30 years next year. Father of four kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. I've been living in West Peabody since 1992. I have a Bachelor of Science undergrad degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Lowell, and MBA from Northeastern University. I was a business consultant for 2 years after I received my MBA, and then started my own small business in 2002 called TechSource Thermal Solutions. We're in electronics distribution, located up in Newburyport. As an acute observer of politics for at least the last 20 years, I've become increasingly concerned and frustrated that our area has not had a conservative voice representing them. So I decided to get involved this spring by reaching out to the Republican State Committee Party, and things just took off from there.
Okay, so you have become the Republican candidate for the 13th District in the state of Massachusetts.
That's right.
Thank you, Bob. The next question that I have been asked to ask is, when you are elected, what is the first piece of legislation you plan to file?
That's a good question. As this is my first foray into politics, my plan immediately is to get acclimated with the environment, the relationships, the mechanics, all those things. It would be difficult, if not impossible, to say what the first piece of legislation I would start to work on. I'm sure it would have to do with the fiscal challenges that the state faces right now, given the pandemic and the lack of resources and revenues that are coming into the state because it's essentially shut down at this point. But yeah, I couldn't say exactly what I have planned for the first day if and when I'm elected office.
Well, the follow-up to that question is more specific.
Okay.
And here it goes. How do you plan to identify and pursue the Danvers issues? And there are several items on this list. State taxes. How do we, as Danvers residents, save on taxes when you get elected?
That's an excellent question, Mark. And, again, as a first-time politician, I can't give you a specific answer right now, but what I believe makes me unique in all the candidates that we have on the ballot this fall is my background in finance and business. I basically spent my entire career facing the exact kind of challenges that the state is going to face and is facing right now. So I want to bring all those tools that I've developed and used over the course of my career on Beacon Hill. I can tell you the first day, if I'm elected, I plan to pop the hood and see what's underneath and start figuring out what needs to be done to get the Commonwealth back on track.
Thank you. That's a good answer, but now comes another one.
Now comes another good answer.
No, another good question. During this year, we have pursued local aid. Local aid for Danvers meant the $750,000 grant that we supposedly received from the state 2 years ago, and it disappeared. Now we have $1 million grant for the barn at Endicott Park, and that seems to be disappearing as well because we as a town cannot afford the $3.5 million that they are planning to spend on the barn, which the state is only providing $1 million. How would you assist Danvers to get more financial aid, specifically from grants, to improve the quality of life in Danvers?
Again, great question, Mark. And I would point out that in this situation, the environment that we're currently in, it's basically something that the state has never experienced before. Budgets that were written before the pandemic are obviously in flux and in question. And my opinion is it should be anything is on the table. Any kind of tax cut, any way where we can reduce spending to try and at least fill the needs that are essential to the folks of Danvers need to be looked at.
Okay. We're hoping that you can bring the bacon back.
I'm hoping I can bring the bacon back too, but you know that bacon is very lean at this point.
Well, the thing is that these grants have already been awarded to us, but for some reason, the local politicians have not been able to materialize those grants. And we are losing money every time we turn around with the state. So being conservative.
It's going to be a challenge, there's no question about it, but I strongly feel I'm uniquely qualified to take a look at those numbers and do some crunching and figure out how we're going to get through this.
The next question is a follow-up on the original, is we in Danvers believe that we are experiencing very high real estate taxes. And now the tax rate in town has been classified. Classification means that the businesses are going to pay more or have been paying more. However, even the classified rate for the residents is way too high because what we're doing is we're impacting the young families and the elderly. So we have both ends of the spectrum being affected by high real estate taxes. How do you think the state will be able to relieve some of that pressure? And you being elected to the office, how can you help?
You know, again, this was one of the sources of my frustration that led me to throw my hat in the ring for this race. Tax increase, never-ending tax increases where no additional service or value from the taxpayer is unacceptable to me. At some point, it reaches a critical mass, and we're going to see families, young families, seriously struggle to buy a home in Danvers, to start a life here without making that tax burden so onerous that they start to sacrifice other quality of life things that they desire and want.
Well, that seems to be the issue that the young families have. And we've had candidates for selectmen run for the positions, but they haven't done very well because everybody in town seems to be ignoring that.
Well, I think one of the challenges is we need to, again, everything needs to be on the table, and we need to look at cuts rather than just generating additional revenue. And that's one of the things that I will absolutely do my first day on the job is figure out where the tough cuts are. I'm sure I'm going to find some low-hanging fruit just based on my personal business experience, but I think there are also going to be some very difficult choices that are going to have to be made. I don't feel we can continually just go to the taxpayer with hat in hand asking for more money.
That's absolutely true. However, that's exactly what's been happening, both locally and with the state. So, we don't even have a budget yet. Now, Mr. May, what is your position on what the Governor Baker is doing, and where does he get the legitimacy to dictate home confinement, masks, and legal qualifications for the police and the rest of the safety units?
So I believe the conditions that we're currently being forced to live under are extremely onerous and not really resulting in the conditions that we need to have in the state. I don't know when this is going to air, but it recently came out that for the second straight month, Massachusetts has the highest unemployment rate in the entire country. That, coupled with the fact, as I just mentioned, the revenues that were expected to come in 2020 obviously aren't happening because everything's shut down. And the phase, I think we're in phase 2, but we backed up a little bit when some of the positive test numbers came out, exacerbated that problem. So also recently reported were 2 consecutive positive test rates being extremely low. So I believe we need to start opening up this state. The consequences of continuing this very severe shutdown more than overcome any benefit to having it continually closed. I mean, people resigned to stay in their houses are exhibiting, we're seeing higher rates of depression, anxiety, increased rates of home domestic violence. We need to open the state back up. We need to start to get some sense of normalcy. I mean, I track the state Department of Health statistics every week, and the fact is, if you're under 60 and in reasonably good health, this virus is not going to kill you. Even if you catch it and get sick, it's not going to kill you. Are there anecdotal stories to the contrary of that? I mean, absolutely. But again, the cure really should not be worse than the disease.
Well, the question that has been raised to me many times is, where does the governor have the legitimate right to do what he's doing? Because this has not been sanctioned by the legislature, who are our elected officials. The governor is being a dictator, and now the town manager is getting to be a dictator in our town. So legitimacy of those actions are being challenged in court. But what would the legislature do, or what should they do?
I agree 100%, and this speaks to the whole issue of personal freedom. Now, when the governor, issues an executive order, mandating everybody to do whatever it is, shelter in place, or wear the mask, or social distance, the fact is that is not a law. The legislature did not look at that. The legislature did not debate that. The legislature did not sign that into legislation. So my opinion is the governor has absolutely overreached his authority in this matter. I understand it's a gray area. I understand that there could be debate, whether or not the governor has the authority to do that. I personally believe it's just an overreach of his authority.
Thank you. All right. Mr. May, or Representative May, if I may. The one question that has been raised over and over again is, why are we, as a population and the House of Representatives and the governor, trying to erase the Indian from our beautiful flag that we have? So, just a observation, people don't understand what the heck is the problem here.
Mark, in my opinion, the move to move the Indian from the state flag is another knee-jerk reaction to placate a very small faction of the people in our state that are also trying to, in some respects, erase history. And I think that's also coupled with what we see in across the country, people tearing down statues, statues that have nothing to do with anything controversial at this point. I mean, I always, growing up, I saw our state flag and I saw the Indian on that state flag as a proud reminder of where the state came from and its history, all the way back to the Pilgrim's Landing.
And they were helpful at that time.
I feel strongly that the flag should not be changed at all. I'm again very proud of the history associated with not the state and the entire country.
Thank you very much. The other questions under this these positions, we're wondering, what is your position on this police immunity bill that has been passed in the state legislature and in the senators, and another one that has been passed by the House of Representatives? It seems to be in a stalemate at the moment. It's gone to a committee, and hopefully it never reappears again. But what are your thoughts on that, and what would you do if you were there?
Well, Mark, first I want to state unequivocally my position on the issue. I support our law enforcement community 100%, no qualifications, full stop. The police reform bill that was passed by the House a couple of weeks ago now also includes this qualified immunity elimination for police officers. And what I like to tell folks that engage me in a conversation about this is, you have to remember that the men and women in law enforcement have to make life or death decisions, often involving their own, in a split second with imperfect information. I strongly believe we should not defund any aspect of law enforcement. I strongly believe we should defend it instead.
Great. Thank you very much. The other questions that have been raised is, and I don't know if this is pertinent at this time or not, but do you need a local office to be in Danvers to answer anybody's questions or be the representative in our town? And how long and who will be invited to attend these monthly meetings? Because that's what our current representative has conducted, those interviews with people at Town Hall, Peabody Hall, Peabody City Hall, and other locations.
That's another excellent question, Mark. To be brutally honest with you, I have not thought that far ahead. I'm hoping I am honored by the voters of Danvers to represent them in November 3rd, but I would be absolutely open to having an office in Danvers. I do plan on holding meetings. I've had a fantastic time the past 6 weeks as of the taping tonight of going around knocking on doors and meeting voters. I've already knocked on 1,200 doors, I believe the latest count is at this time. So I thoroughly enjoy the interpersonal relationship aspect of this, and I'm really looking forward to having, you can have weekly meetings if that's what somebody wants, but regardless of where the office is, it will always be open door. I will always be accessible. I mean, I live in West Peabody. My office is up in Newburyport, so I'm back and forth right through Danvers twice a day. So,
The question that I have finally for this number 5 is, being on the campaign trail, what is your most interesting question that you have been asked or to explain?
most interesting question.
I'll
So I guess my answer to that is I've been asked a lot of questions since we started going door to door 5 weeks ago. The most common question, if people aren't really following the race, is are you a Democrat or a Republican? And unfortunately, in today's environment, that's a loaded question, because anybody who asks that wants to hear one answer or the other. There's no like dialogue if it's one answer, and there's a lot of dialogue if it's the other. But I think the most interesting question I had was probably the second week when we started door knocking. A woman answered the door, and I introduced myself, and she immediately asked, pointing over my shoulder to the street, "Is there something you can do about my sidewalk?" And I turned around, and it was a big route going across, and I kind of explained to her that's really an issue for the local city council and the DPW. But you know, she was kind enough to tell me how her disabled husband had a lot of trouble getting over that route, and she was getting, you know, too old to push him in his wheelchair over that route. And we kind of concluded the conversation, and I asked her, well, you know, how's your husband doing now? She had explained how he was in the hospital, and she kindly said, well, he passed away 2 years ago.
All right. Bob, I have one last question, and the question is raised by many individuals, and it's asking, what is the purpose and depth of your candidacy? Because a lot of people run for office, but they have no idea why they're running. So the depth of the candidacy is the important part, because you're being committed to be a representative for Danvers. And I stress the point about Danvers because my program and this interview is
Sure.
focused on Danvers.
It's a good question, because I am a first-time candidate. I've never run for elected office. It was never on my radar. The depth of the candidacy is to become a conservative voice for our area. I strongly believe that Danvers has been yearning for a true conservative voice to represent them for many years now, at least 10, in my opinion. If I am honored to represent the people of Danvers, you will have a true conservative voice for the first time in 30 years. And I promise you that is something you can take to the bank. I am not using this opportunity to start a second career in politics. I am the only candidate of the 5 in this race that have signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. And I will take that to heart, and you will be able to use that as a yardstick for my performance in the state legislature on all votes fiscal. I am pro-Second Amendment. I am for school choice. As I mentioned, I strongly support law enforcement. Basically, any issue that you have a question about, if you take the conservative position on that's going to define my candidacy. So summing up, I respectfully ask you, the voters of Danvers, to support me with your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. If you'd like more information on the candidacy and how you'd like to get involved in the campaign, please visit our website. It's may4rep.com. That's may4rep.com, and you'll find more information about me and how to get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. May, and congratulations on volunteering to run for this position. But more importantly, I hope you win handily.
Thanks very much, Mark.